Resident Evil is amazing. It's a franchise that took many risks and has blessed our lives with hours of scary entertainment. The series has had its ups and downs, but at the end of the sunrise, Resident Evil has done so much for the gaming industry. Hello, my name is Manny, and today I'm going to rank every single Resident Evil game, giving my quick and honest review of every mainline entry. This is part 1, and today I am only going to rank the mainline games. And yes, some of you guys might hate me for this, but I do consider Resident Evil Code Veronica to be a spin-off, so I will not be ranking that game today. If you guys want a part 2 where I rank all of the spin-off games, then be sure to leave a like on the video and comment below your official rankings of the mainline Resident Evil games. But without further ado,
let's get to it.
Resident Evil 0.
oh boy, Resident Evil 0. Don't get me wrong, you know, I think it's a decent game, but the game definitely has a good amount of flaws. For me, the biggest thing is they took away item boxes, and I remember just in that game dropping so many items and then having to backtrack and then go back and then re-pick up those items. It was extremely tedious, and also, like I said, having no item boxes, I mean, come on, man, that's a staple in the Resident Evil franchise. The gameplay was pretty good. It played just like the Resident Evil 1 remake. I like the whole concept of being able to switch between two characters. That made me really want a co-op mode for Resident Evil 0. The enemies were pretty cool, nothing too crazy. I mean, you have a giant bat, you have the tyrant, you have leech enemies, and the final boss wasn't the craziest. I mean, I thought the final boss was kind of underwhelming. I don't hate the game, but I don't love it. It has a lot of flaws, but it also has some cool things about it. I'm gonna have to put Resident Evil 0 at, I'd say a B. Yeah, I think a B, right in the middle grounds is pretty good.
Resident Evil.
Ooh, here we go. Back to basics. Resident Evil 1. This is the game that started it all. If this game never existed, or let alone wasn't successful, this franchise would not be a thing. One thing I really like about Resident Evil 1 is it feels so claustrophobic. It feels mysterious. It makes you curious. It brings out the best of our curiosity. What's in that next room? What is that noise? What's down that hallway? And the dogs jumping through the window is still one of the most iconic scenes out of the entire franchise. I could sit here and pick out this game's flaws, but we need to remember that this game came out in 1996. Obviously, PlayStation 1 games have a lot of flaws, but when you take it for what it is and compare it to the overall franchise, so while it's not one of my favorites and it's not one of my go-tos, I'm gonna have to give Resident Evil 1 an A ranking.
Resident Evil.
Ooh, the Resident Evil 1 remake. But guys, this is the Resident Evil 1 remake. This is, in my opinion, and arguably the best Resident Evil remake ever made. It simply took the original source material and just did it better. It didn't take anything away. It didn't do anything worse. It enhanced what made the entire franchise what it is. It reworked the puzzles, added new rooms, new locations, new enemies. You have Lisa Trevor, you have the Crimson Heads, and just so many different cutscenes and scenarios in the entire game. This is one of those games that I could just sit down with a cup of hot chocolate on a peaceful 2 a.m. morning and just sit back and play this game. As crazy as that sounds, this game is extremely relaxing. Between the music and just the overall gameplay, I absolutely love the Resident Evil 1 remake. And you could probably tell where I'm gonna put it. This game is going to be put in the S ranking. This is one of my favorite Resident Evil games of all time. And I didn't play the Resident Evil 1 remake until 2015. I know it sounds like I'm a new Resident Evil fan, but I've been with this franchise ever since like 2004. So it's probably weird hearing me say that I've just recently played these games in the past few years, but I've studied these games in and out, and I understand why fans love these games so much, including myself. So yeah, Resident Evil 1 deserves the S ranking.
Resident Evil 2.
Oh boy, Resident Evil 2, the original. Now this one's tough for me because I still don't know if I like it just as much as the remake or if I like it better. Resident Evil 2, in my opinion, is an amazing game. Once again, even if you don't like the gameplay, the game still has a lot going for it. RE2 is a lot of people's favorite Resident Evil game. It's extremely iconic. Between the dialogue, the characters, the locations, the enemies, the music. I mean, do I really gotta go on? I love this game to death and I can't get enough of it. The aesthetic and just everything about it is absolutely amazing. This game adds so much to the lore. It gave us fan favorite characters like Leon and Ada Wong and Claire Redfield. So I like this game better than the original Resident Evil 1, but I like it a little bit less than the Resident Evil 1 remake. But there is no doubt that I am still going to put this game in the S ranking.
Resident Evil 2.
Oh boy, the Resident Evil 2 remake, the game that I actually criticized. But like I've said in the past, and I still stand by my points, I love the Resident Evil 2 remake. It is my second favorite remake, and I think it is simply one of the best Resident Evil games ever made. However, it still suffers from the same issues that the Resident Evil 3 remake had. There were cut enemies, cut locations, and you could tell that the developers definitely cut corners. I don't know if you guys knew this, but they actually finished the script a year before the game came out. That means the developers finished the script in 2018 because they canceled certain parts of the game and they were reworking a lot of the game. So this game was definitely rushed to a certain degree. I'm not saying the entire game was rushed, but definitely a part of the game was definitely rushed. And you could feel it. The second scenario was very familiar to the first scenario, and they cut out certain enemies. Like I think there were giant moths in the original game. They cut out giant spiders. But with that all being said, this game has a lot of strengths. It has amazing cutscenes, solid boss fights, great gameplay, the way the puzzles are done, an amazing ending, a great ending soundtrack. Even though this game has quite a bit of flaws, it is still such an amazing game, and I've put almost 200 hours into this game. And if this was the only game that I could play for the rest of my life, I would not be mad. So I'm gonna give the Resident Evil 2 remake an S ranking.
Resident Evil.
The original Resident Evil 3. Oh boy, this is where things get real spicy going on. Once again, I played Resident Evil 3 Nemesis when I was a kid. I was about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old when I played it for the first time. Not until years later when I bought my PlayStation Vita and then I replayed the game and actually finished it. This game has a lot going for it. And even though I think it's a little bit worse than the original Resident Evil 2, this game still has a lot of amazing concepts. First of all, the Nemesis takes the entire spotlight in this game. Yes, Jill is an amazing character, but Nemesis is in the title for a reason. I also like the whole choice aspect of the game. It added a lot of replay value to Resident Evil 3. The dodge mechanic was clunky, but it was still a nice addition. And the game had more action elements, which I was okay with. And also that save room theme, oh my god. One of the most iconic soundtracks out of the entire franchise. Not a perfect game, definitely not my favorite, and definitely not a bad game. So I'm gonna give Resident Evil 3 Nemesis an A ranking, right alongside Resident Evil 1. Okay, so this is where I'm gonna get a little more critical. Resident Evil 3 Remake. Oh boy. If you've been watching my channel for a minute now, you probably know where I stand on this game. I think it is a horrible remake, but I think it is a great video game. It has great cutscenes, some of the best acting out of the entire franchise. Still has really fun gameplay. I love the dodge mechanic. I love the set pieces, the graphics. I mean, there's so much going for this game. But the biggest complaints that I have is the remake aspects. There's no clock tower, there's cut enemies, cut bosses, and the only two bosses in the game that I enjoyed is the first one where you fight Nemesis when he's using a flamethrower, and the final boss where Nemesis is like a giant goo monster. The gore was toned down, which also sucked because I really love the gore and the physics in the Resident Evil 2 remake. So even though I think this game is a terrible remake, I think it's still a great video game, and I feel like nobody can deny that. It has amazing set pieces, the graphics are really good, the audio design is amazing. The cutscenes are fantastic. The character dialogue and the character interactions are awesome. So just like Resident Evil 0, it's not a terrible game, but it's not my favorite. So I'm gonna have to put Resident Evil 3 Remake at a B ranking, right alongside Resident Evil 0.
Resident Evil 4.
Okay guys, like, you know what's coming up next, right? Come on man, Resident Evil 4.
I'm sure you boys didn't just tag along so we could sing Kumbaya together at some Boy Scout bonfire. Then again, maybe you did.
This is the first ever Resident Evil game that I finished. I was looking through my game collection in 2008 and I came across this video game on the PlayStation 2 called Resident Evil 4. This is the game that I played the most out of my entire life. I couldn't tell you how many times I've beaten this game. Like, I've played this game back to back to back to back. I could literally play this game for the rest of my life, and only this game for the rest of my life. I think this story is amazing. This game is not perfect, but I think the story, the gameplay, just the characters, the enemies, the boss fights, the sound design, the aesthetic, the locations. I mean, this game has so much going for it. I'm not saying Resident Evil 4 is a perfect video game, but for its time, when it came out, it definitely was a perfect video game. And even to this day, for what it is, Resident Evil 4 is a very perfect video game in my eyes. And if it's not obvious already, Resident Evil 4 isn't just my favorite Resident Evil game. It is my favorite video game of all time. Drop a like right now if Resident Evil 4 is your favorite Resident Evil game. I really want to know if I'm the only one. If it's not obvious already, Resident Evil 4 is not just getting an S ranking. It is being put at the front of the list.
Resident Evil 5.
Resident Evil 5. Oh boy. So a lot of people do not like this game, and I might be in the minority here, but I think Resident Evil 5 is a great successor to Resident Evil 4. Now, what I mean, yes, Resident Evil 5 is a very action-oriented game, but I think arguably Resident Evil 5 has better cutscenes and dialogue than Resident Evil 4. I think Resident Evil 4 has a simpler story, but RE5 has so much going for it. I think the boss fights are really fun, for the most part at least. The audio design is amazing. I mean, playing this game with headphones is like, whoa. But the sound design, I think the graphics, the character interaction, the dialogue, the flashback sequences, the DLC. I mean, Lost in Nightmares is arguably the greatest Resident Evil DLC ever made. There is just so much about this game that I love. But once again, I don't think it's the worst Resident Evil game, and it's definitely not the best. But I still think it's a solid Resident Evil game. Surprisingly enough, I'm going to have to put Resident Evil 5 at an A ranking. I know that might seem shocking, but that is my honest review.
Resident Evil 6.
Alright, so Resident Evil 6. So let me just tell you guys right now, give you guys a little sneak peek on my honest taste on this, game, Resident Evil 6. Surprisingly enough, I actually really like Resident Evil 6. So what that means is, personally, I really like Resident Evil 6. But from a critic standpoint, I don't think it's a great Resident Evil game at all. But the thing about this game is, once again, I think it has amazing cutscenes. Even if you don't like the gameplay, even if you don't like the overall, action elements, this game is still crazy and chaotic, and it's still some of the most fun gameplay the entire series has seen. I mean, the Mercenaries mode is some of the most fun I've ever had in a bonus mode. So this game's complicated. I think even as a video game, it has a lot of flaws, but man, the gameplay is just so much fun. But I do like this game a little bit less than Resident Evil 5, so I'm gonna have to give this game a B ranking.
Biohazard 7.
Guys, are we just going to ignore the fact that Resident Evil 7 literally revived the entire Resident Evil franchise? Resident Evil 7 literally picked up the franchise and put it back on its feet. Resident Evil 7 said, hey, get up, soldier. We need you back in the battle. Man, I cannot tell you how much hype I felt before this game came out. Look, I love everything about this game except the third act, but I think the first two acts are some of the strongest set pieces out of the entire franchise. I love the gameplay. I love the soundtrack. I love the music. I love the boss fights. But yeah, this is not a tough ranking at all. If it's not obvious, I love a lot about this game. So I'm gonna have to give Resident Evil 7 an S ranking. All right, here we go. Last but not least, Resident Evil Village. I've said that, yes, I love Resident Evil Village, but it does have some flaws, just like pretty much every other Resident Evil game on this list. But what's weird about Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village is the things that are weak about 7 are strong in 8, and the things that are weak in 8 are strong in 7. For example, I think Resident Evil 7 is a much scarier game than RE8, but I also find RE8's gameplay to be much more fluid and intense than Resident Evil 7. When this game first came out, literally like the first 3 weeks after it came out, this was the only game I played, and I couldn't even tell you how many times I've beaten this game. I have seriously never been that hyped for a video game before. And do I think it lived up to the hype? For the most part, yeah. It's not a perfect game, but look, surprisingly enough, I'm gonna have to put Resident Evil Village at an S ranking. But those are my official rankings of every mainline Resident Evil game. Be sure to leave a like for part 2 and comment your rankings in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.